but I've still gotten into trouble because I've relied on what I feel like I'm an expert on and without consulting with true experts that do this on a daily basis. Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer, and today I want to talk about things that'll blow up your real estate deal. Stuff you need to really be looking for in order to make sure you're getting the right deal and not just getting into any deal. Because the wrong deal, man, they can cost you a lot of money or they can lose you all your money. And so you want to make sure you're getting in the right deal. And now there's plenty of ways deals can go wrong. I mean, first of all, in order to get into a deal, you got to make sure you have things set up right in the first place. And then after that, you got to make sure you maintain doing things the right way after that. And there's all kinds of things that can derail a deal. So I want to go through some of those, common derailing factors or things that can get you into trouble. I've dealt with a lot. I've seen a lot. Not only have I been around for what is it, 18 years now. So I've dealt with a lot myself. I've made plenty of mistakes. But I've also watched other people too. And I've seen some of the mistakes they've made as well. So things that I haven't done, I have watched other people do. And now don't get me wrong. There's probably more things to be done, more mistakes that I can make that'll end up derailing a deal. But I'm going to give you just a few things to really be looking for prior to purchasing a deal. And then maybe we'll dig in a little bit into when we actually have that deal. But for the most part, the big things that are going to derail a deal are things you did either wrong or were thinking a different way or whatever it might be, but it was prior to the purchase that this was all kind of set up. And then from after the purchase, it snowballed into creating issues. So the first thing I want to talk about is the due diligence. So this is the physical aspects of the property. And then I'm going to talk about some of the other issues. We're talking interest rates, we're talking financing, we're talking locations, we're talking obsoletes, stuff like that. Okay, so first let's talk due diligence. I think this is the easiest one to miss because most people that are buying real estate, whether you're buying, by the way, this pertains to you. If you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I am looking to buy a large multifamily. This pertains to you. If you're saying, hey, I'm looking to buy a duplex, this pertains to you. If you're saying, I'm looking to buy my first single family house, maybe even that I'm going to live in or rent, it doesn't matter, or flip, this pertains to you. If you're looking to buy a shopping center, this pertains to you. It doesn't matter what you're looking to do, is if it has real estate, if it has a building, this pertains to you. So due diligence. I think one of the biggest things look, most of you don't have a high level of construction background. And even if you do, you're not a specialist likely, and maybe you're a specialist, but you're not a specialist in everything. So what I'm talking about is you're not a plumber, you're not an electrician, you're not an HVAC contractor, you're not a roofer, you're not a general contractor, you foundation expert, you name it. You're not all of those things. You might have a little bit of a background in them. Great. That's helpful. That's helped me. But I've still gotten into trouble because I've relied on what I feel like I'm an expert on and without consulting with true experts that do this on a daily basis. So first things first on due diligence, the biggest number one thing, in my opinion, that derails more deals than anything else is the plumbing. The plumbing systems carry the water in and out of the building, and that derails so many deals. Now, it doesn't mean it's catastrophic. Sometimes it is, right? But it doesn't mean that it's catastrophic. It just means that plumbing is expensive and you're going to have plumbing issues. And I don't care really how old your building is. The newer, obviously, likely the less, as long as it's done right. But these older buildings, and I'm talking like 30 years old, 25 years old, and older are going to have plumbing issues. When I ask my maintenance guys what's the number one thing that goes wrong, it's always related to plumbing. Always related to plumbing. Um, if I'm doing a due diligence walk and I ask that maintenance guy that's there, hey, what's your biggest issue that you got here? It's always plumbing. And if they say, well, we don't really have any issues, then you know they're just lying, right? So, but it's plumbing. So, I mean, look, we a lot of these older buildings, so now I'm talking like quite a bit older, have galvanized and cast iron piping. So galvanized for the water supply, cast iron for the waste. And that's metal piping, and that metal piping is on its life, like just like life support right now, right? It is not still good. I had a building. This was a long time ago when I was flipping houses. I had a house that I was wanting the plumber to just patch and repair the galvanized pipe. It had some splits due to freeze damage. We're in the cold north of Minnesota. So if you don't blow the lines out perfectly, it's going to have freeze damage. I don't think you could have blown these lines out perfectly, because as I was asking him to do that, he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And I'm begging him to do it basically. And he takes his Sawzall and he hacks apart the plumbing pipe. And I'm like, dude, you're paying for this. Gives me the plumbing pipe and goes, look through that. I can't, you can barely see through. It's like a pinhole that you can see through the plumbing pipe. Now, this is carrying the water to your sink. And he's like, all these pipes are like that. They look like this. So these galvanized pipes are so corroded, so nasty. By the way, if you live in a house that has galvanized piping, you might want to consider trying to budget to replace it, or you're buying a house to live in. But man, your residents are drinking that water. It's so gross. So galvanized piping to me is pretty much a must to replace if you have that. Cast iron piping, same thing happens. It gets corroded and corroded and corroded, and it builds up and builds up and builds up. And all of a sudden, this 2-inch pipe that was supposed to be discharging the waste is now like an inch or a half an inch, and you wonder why you're getting clogs all the time. Now, there are some things you can do to waste pipe potentially to help, the life expectancy. No solution is perfect, but we did have a property where we had sewer issues, roots coming through. We had some lines that had issues. And what a company did is they cleaned those pipes, and then they injected a liner into the pipe. And again, it's not perfect. The best solution would be to dig it up and redo it and have it brand new. But this will help those pipes last another, 15 to 20 years. And so it'll get a pretty good life expectancy out of doing that. And for the cost, it was definitely worth it for us to do it. And that's why we did it. We said, hey, if we can get, 15 to 20 years, and the cost was a fraction of replacing the piping, let's do that, right? So there are some things you can do. I don't think there's really much you can do to your water supply, but to your waste potentially. So what do we look for in plumbing before I move on real quick? You want to, again, cast iron and galvanized. Those two, to me, spell trouble. And you want to budget for replacement, or at least a huge budget for repair. We walked a building not that long ago. This is an apartment building, and they had cast iron in exposed that you could see in the garage. And so as I'm walking through the garage, I'm looking at this cast iron piping, and I just had to laugh because they have these Fernco, which are, the rubber connection. It's the rubber coupling. And so you'd connect two pieces of cast iron waste pipe together where a split happens with this rubber coupling. And it's got a metal kind of outside to be able to tighten so it doesn't leak. And they work pretty decent, actually. But this piping had it everywhere. I'm talking, there was some sections where it was like every couple inches. it had another Fernco connection, coupling connection. It was ridiculous. And it's like, okay, this is only a matter of time that this fails. You've got 30 Ferncos within a 10-foot run of this pipe. This pipe is garbage. It's just trash. And so you look at that, and you go, okay, well, we're going to have to replace a ton of this pipe. Like almost probably all of it in the basement or in the garage would be the right answer. And they've just been band-aiding this for who knows how long. I mean, probably 30, 20, 30 years. Um, Copper too can be an issue. So you want to look for discoloration on the copper pipes, especially the connections. You want to see if there's a lot of green on that copper piping. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad, but copper piping can corrode. And look, it's another metal, and so it's not going to last forever. So look for that. Copper is known to get pinhole leaks in it. So just be aware of any staining in the ceilings, um, you know, dripping on the basement floor if there's a basement, that type of thing. The last one is PB, polybutylene. PB piping was not really common in a lot of areas, but in some areas in the South and a little bit in the Midwest, they installed that piping. It's just bad. It's just got to be replaced. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just garbage. It cracks. It's brittle. So it's usually black piping, but it can be other colors too. It's plastic. And it was like the first plastic piping they ever tried to install. And it only was installed for a handful of years. They stopped using it and went to copper, back to copper, and said, okay, this stuff is garbage. Um, so plumbing, roots in your sewer systems, that's a big one. Check out your sewer system. Do a sewer scope. Make sure you don't have any, cracks, low spots, roots, stuff like that. Costs you a little bit of money, but do a sewer scope. It's completely worth it to get that done. We had a property and we did the sewer scope, so we knew it. But I mean, when you chopped out the sewer line, you would look through it and there's a tree root, but it's basically the entire size of that sewer, like completely filled with a root. And so nothing waste is not flowing through there. So what happens? Well, that, builds up, backs up. Eventually the sewer pipe breaks and now all that sewage is going into the soil and you get tons of backups, all kinds of problems. So do your sewer scope. It doesn't cost you that much money. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. So what's the issues if you don't take care of the plumbing and the sewer? Well, again, you got backups all the time. And so you're constantly snaking out drains, stuff like that. Eventually, you're going to have to replace them anyways. And for plumbing, I mean, you got constant leaks, and leaks cause issues, and tenants are pissed because you're always turning their water off. And man, it's just constant, right? And so you lose residents, and it just costs you a ton of money. And if you didn't budget for it, now you got to patch it and do these little tiny patches, and they just keep on happening. Roof, I mean, this one's easy. Get a roofer up there, get it inspected, try to find when the roof was last replaced. Most roofs are, 30 years is kind of their max life expectancy, and most cities have permit records that date back 30 years. And so typically you can find, was a permit pulled for this? When was it pulled? Now every municipality doesn't require, and every state doesn't require a permit for a roof. So maybe not, but at least check and see. And that way you can go, okay, this roof is 18 years old, 14 years old, whatever. And the life expectancy of these shingles, according to this roofer, is X amount. So this is what we've got left. Flat roofs, you can do core samples. You really want to have that roofer look and inspect and tell you how much life expectancy is left on the roof, and then get a budget for replacement so we can actually put it in our replacement reserves to be able to budget for that. Unless it's, brand new, and then you just budget some repair and maintenance. Flat roofs are great, quite frankly. A lot of people don't like them, but I don't mind them as long as you know what you're getting. And so, where to me a flat roof is not that bad is when it's pitched properly. We don't have any low spots, and then it's well maintained, and you have to continue to maintain it. These EPDM roofs can last 50 years if you maintain them properly. It's just when they don't get maintained, they break down, and then all of a sudden you got leaks. And once a leak starts in a flat roof, forget it. And that's where flat roofs are the worst, is because on a pitched roof, typically we can find the leak pretty quickly. We can do a little patch and we move on. On a flat roof, sometimes you can find it, sometimes you can't, because water runs crazy ways. Water runs uphill all the time because just of the pressure. And so you just don't know. And sometimes these flat roofs, you just end up having to rip it out if you don't maintain it the right way. Of course, check your electrical system. Look if you have knob and tube wiring or anything like that. Or I think the biggest thing we run into is these breakers that aren't any good anymore. Insurance companies won't insure you; they'll require you to replace them. So the Stab Lock or Federal Pacific are the most common ones that are a problem. And so you'll want to get an electrician over there, get quotes, and understand what you got going on. Look, you've got your structural issues, and so obviously, if you've got some sort of structural potential issue, you want to get a structural engineer out there to take a look at the property. You probably have to renegotiate with the owner because unless you knew it from the beginning. Um, the other thing too is I see a lot of people, look, you run into flooding or even moisture issues. So, do you see any mold anywhere? Do you see anything that looks wet, damp? Does the flooring feel damp? Look in the Midwest, we have a lot of these subgrade units that are about they're the garden style. They're half of them are underground, or maybe 3 feet are underground. The rest of it's above ground. But the issue with those units is they get a lot of water in them, and I actually really don't like those units. First of all, I don't want to be underground. But second, I just don't like those units because they have so many water moisture issues. So I ideally want all my units above grade if I can. We do own some subgrade units. Again, I always get water issues. Even when we do all kinds of landscaping, when we got good gutter work, we've got good drainage, all kinds of stuff. There's always a reason uh, that they get moisture in them. And so, you have to dig down and waterproof the basement, drainage, gutters, all that kind of stuff can help. But you're probably always going to deal with some sort of issue as far as moisture getting into these subgrade units. And that's just going to be a problem that you're going to have to deal with. Look, I owned a property that had subgrade units, and this was a multifaceted problem. So we had plumbing issues in this property, and it would always leak and get into these subgrade units, and then you'd get moisture from the outside that would get into these subgrade units. So we remodeled these units, did a beautiful remodel. We had two buildings that actually flooded again due to piping, and so we remodeled them again, and but they would constantly get moisture in them, and so it'd always be a problem. And you'd run to humidifiers, and you'd clean up and try to mitigate all that problem. But if the resident wasn't doing their job, then it was always an issue, and so we'd have these problems. I ended up selling this building, and now today there's more issues with these owners, with the previous owners, because now the bank owns it. But those two buildings are boarded up, and it's just the sad truth about subgrade units. I'm like, the only fix for that building, in my opinion, is you just literally fill in those subgrade units, and that's no longer a living area, right? That's literally just like capped off, filled in. Um, so just be cautious about those, and really look for mold. You can do moisture tests so you um, understand what's going on in those. Okay. Look, lots of things to look for when we're looking for um, renovations and capex and what to do. My biggest piece of advice to you is when you're looking at a building, think about all the things that can go wrong and try to fix them as quickly as you can. So when we are actually doing this stuff, we're buying a property, we're trying to mitigate our headaches. We're trying to budget for these things. And a lot of stuff we actually do right away. Some stuff we just budget for and wait for, like our HVAC, look, our furnaces, our water heaters, and our air conditioning and stuff like that. We're going to wait potentially to do that stuff unless it's really bad, but we're going to wait to do a lot of that stuff until it actually starts to break down. But like plumbing issues, I'm not, right? There's certain things I'm not going to wait for. So, but you still got to budget for it and understand. And then the other thing too is the last thing I want to hit on, just physical look. I think to me, I want to give my residents a great place to live. So I've got a budget for a renovation on most of my units, if not all of them. And so just being very cautious on how you budget and making sure you have the contractors that are going to be working on these units to actually give you the pricing and not assume for yourself what the pricing is going to be. Because over and over and over again, I've made that mistake of assuming pricing, and then all of a sudden I'm off on the pricing, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we do these renovations for either less, cut corners, or, man, where do we find, the money, or maybe we can't do them all, whatever. But, if you make that mistake, you got to figure out how to be nimble, but try not to make that mistake in the first place and just get your budgets right. And always plan on contingency. Look, the more you do, the bigger the contingency should be. I always tell people like 10 up to 20%, but 10 to 15% is a good marker for just an overage on your budget. You're going to go over, and just plan on 10 to 15%, maybe even 20% if you got a big renovation. All right, let's talk about a couple other things that can blow up your deal prior to purchasing. Look, debt's huge. Uh, Floating rate debt. I mean, look, if the interest rates go up, you're stuck and you still have to pay the bank. And so a lot of people learn this valuable lesson, including myself, over the last cycle where, interest rates were 3, maybe 4% that you're paying to the bank. And all of a sudden you go up to 7 to 9%. That you're all of a sudden paying to the bank. And that hurts. That's not going to allow you to perform on that property. And, but cap rates went up because of it, and your performance goes down, and all of a sudden you're feeding the beast, and that can only last so long. And that got a lot of people into a lot of trouble. So a lot of people buy what's called a rate cap. Well, a rate cap's a big expense. All the rate cap is you prepaying the interest. That's it. You're just prepaying the interest. And by the way, if you buy a rate cap today, and you're going to prepay interest, but what happens if interest rates go down? Well, I guess you lost on that gamble. What happens if interest rates stay flat? Well, I guess you lost on that gamble, right? And so you got to buy this rate cap. It's expensive. You get some value out of it because you get some protections, but it's basically an insurance, a safety net that says my interest rate can only go up so far, right? So maybe you buy a rate cap that's in the money, meaning that whatever my payment is today, call it 5%. That's what it is. That's the highest it can ever go. It can only go lower. It can't go above 5%. Now, but you prepaid for that again. So that's expensive. You have to budget for that. They typically are only locking them in for a couple of years. So budget for multiple rate caps if you're going to go that way. I just say avoid them and fix your debt, but that's up to you. Odd layouts. Odd layouts or weird looking buildings can get you into trouble. And they get you into trouble because nobody wants to live there. They're obsolete. Nobody cares. They don't want to live there. I don't care how beautiful a renovation you did. I don't care what neighborhood it's in. This is a weird property and I don't want to live here. And so just make sure that the layout's decent, or you can fix it if the layout sucks. Like, can you take down walls and open it up and make it make it functional again. So just be cautious about weird layouts and weird exteriors. Tuck under garages are often not loved. So just be cognizant of what you're buying and what it looks like, and would you feel comfortable living there? Does this jive with you? And if you're not sure, bring some people through there and just say, what do you think? Would you live here? And if the overall answer is, nah, I don't really like it, then avoid it. Like, you don't want to be stuck with that problem. I don't care how beautiful renovations you do. I don't care what type of neighborhood it's in. If it's obsolete, it's obsolete. And unless you can structurally change it, there's nothing you can do about that. And I've bought some buildings that weren't quite obsolete, but that weren't great. And it's always harder to get those units rented. It just is. The other thing too is, and this kind of goes to structural, but maybe the structural issue is solved, but you've got lots of sloping floors. And so be cautious with sloping floors. Again, people don't like it. Can you fix that potentially? If it's not a structural issue, it might be an easy fix. You might just be able to do some self leveler. You might have to redo the subfloor and kind of, shim it up and stuff like that, but that could get really expensive. So just be aware of that too. The last thing I want to mention too is just the overall maintenance. Understand what type of building you're buying and how old your building is and the amount of maintenance that you have to do, because that can really kill a budget if you're not thinking about overall maintenance. I mean, look, a 2010 built property is going to have far less maintenance, should have far less maintenance than a 1970s built. But the other thing too is, if I remodel that 1970s and I do the things that we've talked about, I do a lot of the plumbing, I sewer scopes, and sewers look good, I replace the roofs and all that kind of stuff. Now I've eliminated a lot of the maintenance problems, not all the maintenance problems, but a lot of the maintenance problems. And so just understand, the scope and what you're doing to the building, and then how that's going to affect your overall maintenance of the building. I think that's really important. And then the last thing that's going to kill your deal is just that you're not operating it properly. Look, you just don't have good operations. You hire a poor property manager. You're trying to property management. You suck at it, whatever it is. You just have a poor property management and asset management. And you're just not doing a good job at that, or whoever you hire is not doing a good job at it. They're not leasing the units. They're not maintaining units. What kills more deals, in my opinion, is a poor budgeting. And so now you can't do the maintenance. You can't do the renovations that you need to do. And so all of a sudden your property that was good is bad. That's going to kill it too. Oh, and the very last thing is location. I think location is going to make or break a lot of deals. And especially if we're not following the rules that I already talked about, man, you can't outrun a bad location. It's just impossible. So understand where you're investing and do it the right way. Okay. That was a lot. Hopefully you caught some good things. Just be diligent. And the problem with due diligence, you're always looking for the bad things. So you're going to leave it likely just like, oh my gosh, what am I buying here? But take a step back, breathe, put it all in a spreadsheet, talk to the experts, figure it all out, put your numbers together. Okay, this deal still works, or yep, I'm good here. That's easy to forget to do, especially when you walk into a building. There's multiple problems that maybe you didn't expect. Sometimes it makes you feel like this deal sucks and I got to get out of it right away. But take a step back, breathe, put it all in a spreadsheet, understand the numbers, don't force anything, but get the deal done if it still works. All right, that's all I got for today. You have a fantastic rest of the day. Make every day a Saturday. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. But your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.